Hello and welcome back to Primate Podcasts. I'm Ian Redmond and I'm talking to Adams Cassinga. We resume the story and Adams tells us more of his amazing life.
And so after breaking the bad news to my family, I quickly headed off to Kinshasa. That's the capital city of my country. And because that's where everything happens, I had to be there. It was my first time there. And now I didn't fit in. I'm Swahili speaking. In Kinshasa, they speak Lingala. I couldn't speak Lingala. I was speaking French with an Anglophone accent. Like things didn't really add up. And I was walking from one office to the other. And I quickly discovered that the administration in the Congo does not work like the administration in other countries where I've ever been, mostly Anglophone Africa. Uh, the the administration, or rather the red tape, was longer than it was necessary. There were more powerful individuals than strong institutions. And it's still the case today. Now, when I was talking about conservation, some people ask me, for instance, are you a researcher? Are you a scientist? Then I'll say no. Then they say, what is your business with conservation? And I'll go to other offices where they will say, for instance, okay, yeah, Adams, we've heard your message. You care about your country, you care about wildlife. Yes, but where are the white people? Then I wonder, why do white people have to be here? Because they tell me, because these are the true conservationists and they've got the money. You don't have the money. You do not have a PhD. Now, what are you talking about? So the whole issue kind of discouraged me. And you can see my story is not a different story from the average African young man. We love conservation, we love nature, we love wildlife, but there are so many misconceptions, there are so many myths which still surround us. And unfortunately, other people that we look up to have perpetuated that and have made it almost like facts, and yet they are not. And if I was really soft hearted, I think at that moment I would have quit, but I didn't quit. I kept looking for alternatives. At the time, they were saying that we needed more guns and more ammunition to go and fight against the poachers within protected areas. And that's what I did at the time. I also went and I started volunteering patrols within protected areas. I think I must have been in almost 60 or 70% of all our protected areas. Unfortunately, I had to pay
Just as a
price.
volunteer?
Yes, as a volunteer. And I had to pay a price. I had to buy that position. So as a result, before they could take me, I was buying ration. I buy ration because most of our park rangers do not have sufficient ration from the state. And therefore, when I bring in that surplus, they really take me as a comrade. And it becomes a gateway for me to be part and parcel of that family. But unfortunately, what I was looking forward to in arresting poachers, we never came really across any poachers. And each time some of my colleagues will tell me that they've arrested poachers, it will be usually the local youths trying to catch rodents or birds because they're hungry, trying to abuse them, and so on and so forth. And please don't get me wrong. I do not say the poachers didn't exist. They do exist and they existed because in most cases, when I left an area, there'll be an ambush. And unfortunately, some of the same people that I patrolled with, they'll be killed. And to date, as you may know, the DRC account for about 90% of all park rangers killed in line of duty worldwide. In other countries, that will revolt other people, and this is going to attract the attention of national government as well as security agencies. But back home, human life is so cheap that such incidents are taken lightly. And I do understand that we've got our own challenges, but at least we should try and address such issues. And because nobody else is addressing such issues, that's why I always bring them up each time I'm having.
But Conserve Congo is not just you. You've built up a team. So how did you get your first comrade to join this fledgling non-governmental organization?
So most people that I approached did not understand what Conserve Congo was all about. Because now when I left the protected areas, I just thought to myself, these people who are trying to be invisible, for us to be able to track them down, we've got to be invisible as well. And that's when I got the idea that when an animal is killed in a protected area, it's not for it to stay in a protected area. Eventually, it's got to come out, go to urban areas where it's going to scoop some money. And therefore, my position with my team should be in those urban areas and carry out investigations, which eventually will tell us who is involved, the routes they use, as well as their stash houses. So I approached a lot of my friends, my immediate friends or people that I knew. Everybody was excited until it came the time to act. Most of the people, when now they were in the field and they had to execute everything we've spoken about, they got scared and a lot of them quit. Other people came in and they said, where is the money? Then I said, we volunteers. They left. Other people came looking for white faces because they associate white faces with knowledge, power, and money. And when they did not see that, they left. So for like 4 or 5 years, it was just me doing investigations, being part of the operations of arrests, financing the police so that they can do their work, teaching them that there are legal texts which protect wildlife, and still being caught testifying against the culprits.
So you had no power of arrest, no authority to go after the criminals. You had to collect the information and then bring the police along who had the power of arrest. Or was the wildlife department involved? Were you getting support from the authorities whose job you were effectively doing, but you were helping them by filling in the gaps in their knowledge, perhaps you could say?
So yeah, as an individual back in the DRC, I do not have any power to arrest anybody. That's the job for the police. And when I went to the police would say, no, our job is to protect you as the people. Our job is not to protect animals. But when I started showing them the legal text and, of course, a little bit of motivation to grease their palms, they agreed. And very soon I created a little friendship with a certain unit, which we still work with to date. And this is how we managed to do our first case. Unfortunately, the Department of Wildlife wasn't involved. And the reason being, in the DRC, the Wildlife Authority is limited only to protected areas, national parks, nature reserves, zoos, and botanical gardens. Finish. So if a case is happening elsewhere other than these cited places, any agent affiliated to the Wildlife Authority will also intervene the same way I intervene as somebody who just denounced a crime being committed. They will not be effectively engaging in arresting these people. And that's the reason why Conserve Congo is filling that gap, because the Wildlife Authority is not able to do that. Therefore, us being part of the civil society, we chipped in and we cover them there.
So from what I read of your exploits in your newsletters and on social media, people can find Conserve Congo on Facebook and Instagram and other platforms. Some of it is arresting traffickers who are dealing in ivory or pangolin scales or skins, and some of it is rescuing living animals that are going into the illegal wildlife trade as specimens, either to be sold as pets or to zoos or other purposes. So how does that balance out? How is it usually that a dealer has some live, some dead things, or are some people specialists in ivory or pangolin and other people dealing with live animals?
Yeah, so traffickers come in different shapes. And yes, they are very selective of species. For instance, somebody who deals in ivory usually also has pangolin scales, whereas somebody who deals in skins usually also deals in live animals such as birds and primates. You're also going to find there are specific dealers of bushmeat. And as we speak, there are local bushmeat dealers and there are also international bushmeat dealers. For instance, here, every month, there is at least 15 tons of bushmeat leaving Kinshasa, entering the EU zone and even parts of America. And, bushmeat is strange because bushmeat looks just like bushmeat. It smells like bushmeat. It tastes like bushmeat. So it's very difficult for you to differentiate a pangolin meat from a giant rat's meat, buffalo meat from elephant meat. It all looks the same, but those who are used to seeing it, to tasting it, to eating it, they know the difference. And therefore, what they do is they'll cut off the hooves, they'll cut off the claws, they'll cut off the head, they'll cut off the tail. And to an untrained eye, it looks more or less the same.
Yes,
and they'll chop it into smaller pieces.
But many of these species are listed on the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, and they're supposed to have permits if they're going to be exported from one country to another, and an import permit for the receiving country. But even if it's of a common species which isn't protected by CITES, the health regulations, we're living in a time of zoonotic diseases and pandemics that people are scared about. You would think that shipments of wild animal meat of unknown species would be confiscated because they pose a health risk, let alone whether or not they're an endangered species. And all primates, apart from humans, we're primates, but we don't list ourselves, but all non-human primates are listed on CITES. If they're not on Appendix 1, which forbids commercial trade, then they're on Appendix 2, which regulates it and needs permits. So it sounds like if there's 15 tons of bushmeat leaving Kinshasa for Europe and America, that's not with permits.
Yes. No, there's never any permits. So there is still a lot of ignorance. There is still a lot of ignorance when it comes to wildlife trafficking and trade in general. For instance, in the DRC, the texts and legal texts which govern the trade of wildlife, they're not very clear. And sometimes they fall into conflict against each other. Even though currently we've got a new model, which is Law 14-003 of 2014, which clearly stipulates that it is prohibited to hunt, to hurt, to kill, to sell, even to gift somebody with certain species because they are totally protected. But it is some of these dignitaries, the authorities, who started having them as pets. And quickly, the dilemma escalated and people realized that they could make money out of it, and therefore they started selling them. And you still have in certain cases where people will brandish permits, but these are fake permits, permits which are not recognized. And sometimes you could have real permits, but which were issued in a very illegal way. Like there are procedures which were not followed. For instance, in a country like ours, where we haven't done an inventory of our wildlife for the last 3 to 4 decades, how can a scientific authority issue a permit for a transfer or a sale of a protected animal based on the fact that we don't know how many of those are still in the wild? And those are some of the questions that we keep asking ourselves.
So if this podcast was reaching the ears of a customs officer in Britain or Europe or North America or anywhere in the world, what would you like to say to them?
I would like to say to them that most of them still think that wildlife trafficking is solely an African problem, and it's not. It is not. And the same problems that we face in Africa is quickly going to escalate and affect you, because very soon you're going to see blood money emanating from wildlife trafficking, which is illegal, will get into the country. But at the same time, I would also want to tell them that they shouldn't be just asking, do you have anything to declare? No. Of course, they're going to say no. But please double check. In those bags, there could be something which not only is going to harm you, but which could also extend a crime which was committed thousands of miles away to come and be part and parcel of your community. So you should check it, because wildlife trafficking affects everybody. And in any way, wildlife crime overlaps other crimes. Usually the people who kill animals wouldn't hesitate killing another human being. They wouldn't hesitate trafficking other things if they could. And there is a lot of money laundering that goes with it. So we should always be on the lookout.
Yeah, the same criminal gangs that traffic drugs and people and arms also traffic wildlife, but the penalties for trafficking wildlife are very low. So it's a high profit, low risk criminal activity. To say nothing of the health risk of these chopped up animals traveling around the world with who knows what viruses or bacteria attached to them. So it really is a serious problem. But tell me about the live animals that you rescue. What happens to them?
All right. So we have in our 10 to 11 years of existence, we don't just put the bad guys behind bars, but also we have the privilege of rescuing some of these live animals. Most of them being birds, primates, reptiles. So usually we send them to a sanctuary. And the sanctuary are places where animals are given a second chance, where there is a number of professionals, veterinarians, scientists who are educated on how to look after these animals, and perhaps in the near future on how to reintroduce them into their natural habitat. Unfortunately, in the DRC, being the size of the entire Eastern Europe, we only have about 4 sanctuaries only. And out of these 4 sanctuaries, all 4 of them are species selective. So it means they only take a certain species of wildlife, and they are not as big as we may think. So they're limited in terms of resources and capacity of taking in animals. And it limits us on the number of rescues that we can do. I'm not saying that's the only stumbling block that we have, but that is one of the biggest. So a country like the DRC normally should have at least perhaps 20 to 30 different sanctuaries, because I do believe that at the level where poaching and trafficking is going, very soon our forests are going to be empty. And should our forests become empty, the forest will collapse. And once it collapses, it's going to require us to go to other countries in order to negotiate animals which were rightfully ours, so that we can reintroduce them into the wild. And reintroducing an animal into the wild is not a guarantee, because the animal has already lost its instinct, its wild instinct, and therefore it becomes a risk that we're taking. Yeah. And those are some of the worries we have.
So in 5 years' time, what would you like Conserve Congo to be seen as?
In 5 years' time, I would like Conserve Congo to be recognized as an entity, as an organization that cares for wildlife, not just as a local nonprofit. I would like Conserve Congo to be mentioned when they mention the likes of WWF, WCS, because we do the same work, we put in the same effort, and therefore we should get the same consideration. Nobody should be a big brother to the other. And this can only be done if Conserve Congo is empowered with capacity building, if it's empowered with good governance, if it is empowered as an institution. It shouldn't be about individuals such as Adams Cassinga. Conserve Congo should be an entity on its own, and the individuals that operate or that manage it should be also their own.
You're on the way there, because you've built up a team of investigators nationwide, have you not?
That's right. For the last 5 years, we've had a very stable team of over 100 people.
And I know it sounds very huge, but that simply means that each individual is controlling the size of Rwanda, the Republic of Rwanda. So our country being so big, 100 people is not too many. But also, we need resources in order to keep those people. Yes, the love we have for our country, the passion we do have for our wildlife, but it can only take so much for somebody to be a volunteer, yet they wake up every morning going to work. And I know I have utilized my leadership skills to convince my team members to give me support. And the support they have given, we have proved to the world that we do care about our natural heritage. We have proved to our state that we are able to handle responsibly the tasks that we have assigned to ourselves. But at the end of the day, the people have got to live too. And we cannot be volunteers forever, whereas other nonprofit organizations don't have volunteers forever. And those are some of the challenges that we face. It is perceived that when somebody comes from another country, he works for a salary, but when they recruit locals, they'll have to be volunteers. And those are some of the things that we would want to change. You do not have to be white or non-African to be in conservation. You do not need to have a PhD or be a great scientist to be in conservation. Today, conservation has become everybody's business. At every level, at every corner of wherever you live, you can make a difference. And that's the message that we have brought for the last year.
It's a very, very powerful message. And I know that education and working with communities is a large part of your strategy, as well as investigating and locking up the bad guys. Hopefully, when the bad guys come out of prison, they'll know better. Maybe they're the ones you need to hire, because they know all the ways of the traffickers and the poachers. How do you reach out to communities?
So we've realized that we cannot just keep punishing people without teaching them. Punishment is for somebody who knows and who deliberately commits a crime, knowing fully that what he's doing is wrong. And therefore, we have added 2 more objectives on our mission, and one being education. And when we talk about education, we do not mean that we should go and grab everybody and bring them to the classroom. As a matter of fact, we want to take the classroom to the people. We want to speak the language that they can understand. You know, all the books in conservation are still written in English and French. And not everybody in our communities can read. And therefore, we need to try unorthodox methods to educate our masses. For instance, we have split this education objective into 3 blocks. One is to focus on the children between the ages of 12 and 18. And these are scholars, people who are still going to school, and we can reach them into their schools. We can incorporate this into their curriculum, 30 minutes every week, where we talk to them about the importance of looking after our environment, keeping our environment safe and clean, planting fruit trees, because not only that it gives us shade, but it also gives us food, educating children about animals that they have never seen. At least if we can bring a television set and we can put in a CD, and they can be able to view some of the animals that will take them forever before they can see them. And also their mind is still fresh and flexible, and therefore we rely on this to ensure that we are raising adults, future adults who are environmentally responsible. But then we've got a second type of education that we provide to decision makers of our society. These are the policemen, the judges, the prosecutors, customs officers, because these are the people who stand in these points, and we can talk and shout as activists. But for as long as these decision makers cannot make the right decisions in favor of the wild, there is nothing that is going to be achieved. And even though the milestones are a bit slow, and sometimes they do not work into our favor, slowly we are seeing that difference. And we're seeing people coming up, people who didn't understand. In the past, they did not understand the gist of what we were trying to do. I was personally impressed recently when I was in Kisangani, at the second international conference on the Congo Basin biodiversity. After I made my presentation, and the Secretary General of the Department of Environment came to me and he said publicly, you know, before you spoke, I thought I knew what wildlife trafficking was. But after you've just spoken, now I think I understand better. And I felt so proud because we have just conquered one huge person who has got the power to sign against all for the law. And therefore, that becomes an entry point for us to introduce things that would want changed or amended. But also, we do go into communities and speak to communities about conservation. And we have done this by creating an objective called conservation through education. We have a plan of introducing agricultural activity not only as an option to poaching, but also as a way to ensure food security. We have realized that most people would poach just because they're hungry. The DRC imports every year food from America, from Europe, from South Africa, worth about $3 billion. Yet our yearly budget is only sitting at $11 billion. So that goes to show you that at least a quarter of our budget goes to food which we do not produce. And that becomes a problem, an element which could cause people to eat wildlife because they've got nothing else to do. And we can see a lot of success in this because the point is not really to feed the people per se. But the first thing that we benefit from this is to get the people together. And while we are tilling the land, we start having these conversations. We start to teach each other. We start to being open towards each other that really, I was a poacher, but with these 5 pigs that I'm having, I'm better off. And once we start having those uncomfortable conversations, this is where a common ground is established between us as conservationists and the people who would be poachers or traffickers. And as a result, we have converted so many poachers and traffickers in the past. And these are the people who are now giving us information. If you see us 5 years ago, the way we used to work, and today, you're going to see that we've got more results, very tangible results today. And that's because we have made partnerships, even with those that would otherwise view as belligerents, and which have become now converts and fighters for wildlife.
So I was going to ask you if when you meet young men who haven't found a mentor, and just as you might have done, could go into a life of crime or unproductive ways of making a living. Have you been able to mentor some of those? Are they now some of the 100 people who are helping conserve Congo? And do you see that as a way of changing things, so that you are offering bright young men who've got a bit of initiative, a bit of spark, a career on the right side of the law?
Yeah, Ian, sometimes it's easy to sit on the other side of the line and judge. But through the experience that I've been through in my life, I am not the judgmental type. And I can guarantee you that there are so many young, bright minds out there with so much potential, but because we judge them before we even approach them, and therefore that potential gets wasted because there are no role models, because there are no mentors. And I have taken it upon myself. In my life, like I said, I believe in miracles. And the reason why I believe in miracles is because I have met people such as yourself. I've met people like the editor who gave me a second chance when I didn't even deserve it. And therefore, I believe in being an angel and giving people who deserve it a chance so that they can prove themselves. And you'll be astonished at what people can achieve positively if given a chance. So we cannot keep judging people according to the color of their skin, according to the educational background, according to this, according to that. A human being is more than what meets the eye. And if given a chance, you never know who's going to invent the next aspirin. Today we are having paracetamol and all of that, and that's because there are people who were given a chance in the past. And we don't know what else can come up and about if we give the next person a chance. And that's the reason why Conserve Congo is what it is today, because we have been given a chance. And therefore, we utilize this platform as a mentoring platform, as a mentoring mechanism that can empower young people. Currently, I personally am mentoring about 24 young men, those who have been to school and those who haven't been in school. And I'm giving them a chance to prove themselves in many different aspects of life, not just in conservation, because conservation also needs leaders in other things. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we need those young minds because that's the future.
Adams, that's a very powerful thought to end on. Thank you so much for telling me your extraordinary life story. I think we're going to have to do this in two parts. It's a long but inspirational life. Thank you for sharing it with us, and I look forward to seeing Conserve Congo become the institution it deserves to be, giving those bright young minds a better way of life and making Congo the country it should be, the most beautiful and biodiverse on the planet. So thank you, Adams.
Thank you very much, Ian. With everyone's efforts, we shall reach there. Thank you and take care.
Excellent. Thank you, Adams.